Have you ever had a neighbor so entitled, so completely out of touch with reality, that they thought your private property was a community park? Well, buckle up. Because today on HOA Psychotic, we dive into a true story where an insane HOA Karen decided that my backyard pool belonged to her, and when words didn't work, she brought bolt cutters. I had no choice but to defend myself. And let's just say, she didn't see the pepper spray coming. Stick around, because this wild confrontation ends with police charges, and a neighbor who learned the hard way that private property really does mean private. When I first pulled into the cracked, ivy-draped driveway of my new house, I thought I had stumbled onto a hidden gem. It sat on a quiet cul-de-sac, framed by old oak trees and neat suburban gardens. The house itself was nothing fancy, modest, with pale blue siding and a wraparound porch that had seen better days, but it had something I'd always dreamed of, a big backyard with a beautiful in-ground pool. The previous owner, Mrs. Holloway, was a sweet older woman in her 80s, moving into assisted living. I remember her greeting me at the open house with a plate of sugar cookies and the warmest smile I'd seen in years. "The neighbors," she said, patting my arm. "They're like family here. They've always come over to swim." I never minded, kept the place lively. I smiled politely. But in the back of my mind, I made a mental note. I was younger, still working remotely, and craving a bit more solitude than backyard pool parties every Saturday. The deal went through faster than I expected. Within a month, the house was mine. On the day I moved in, I could barely hide my excitement. I had big plans, maybe a vegetable garden along the back fence, some lounges by the pool, lazy weekends reading under the sun. It was my little slice of freedom. The first sign of trouble came less than 48 hours later. It was a blazing Saturday afternoon. I was inside, unboxing kitchen supplies, when I heard the unmistakable sounds of kids laughing and water splashing. Frowning, I set down a box and peered out the window. There, without a care in the world, were 3 kids and 2 adults, strangers, lounging by my pool like it was the neighborhood rec center. One woman, in particular, stood out. Platinum blonde hair piled high on her head, enormous sunglasses, and a neon pink visor that practically screamed problem. She barked at the kids to share the floaties and shouted across the yard like she owned the place. I stepped outside, trying to keep my cool. Hi, I said, waving awkwardly. "I'm sorry, but the house has changed owners. It's private now." The woman didn't even turn her head. She just waved me off like an annoying mosquito. "We know. We've always used the pool." Mrs. Holloway never minded. "It'll be fine." "No," I said, a little firmer. "It's not fine. I'm the new owner. I need my privacy. Please, don't use the pool anymore." That got their attention. The woman, who I'd later learn was named Karen, the self-proclaimed president of the neighborhood HOA, which wasn't even real, stood up, hands on her hips, glaring at me like I had just kicked her puppy. "This is a community pool," she declared. "No," I said, as calmly as I could manage. "It's my backyard. Private property. You need to leave." After several more minutes of huffing, eye-rolling, and theatrical packing up, they finally shuffled out, dripping wet and muttering under their breath. I waited until they were gone before closing the gate, locking it with the flimsy old latch Mrs. Holloway had installed. That night, I ran to the hardware store. I bought a heavy-duty pet-grade padlock, the kind built to keep out raccoons, or, apparently, entitled neighbors. I even had a bright red sign printed that read, "Private property. No trespassing." I installed the new lock myself the next morning, my hands steady but my gut churning. I didn't want to make enemies in my first week here, but I also wasn't about to let strangers wade around in my pool while I paid the bills, maintained the filters, and handled the upkeep. As I clicked the padlock shut, a small part of me hoped that would be the end of it. Surely, I thought, once they realized I was serious, They'd respect the boundary. But deep down, a nagging feeling twisted in my chest, that feeling you get when you know the storm hasn't passed, just circled around to strike harder later. I would soon learn that with people like Karen, no boundary is sacred. And my real battle was only just beginning. I figured maybe, just maybe, Karen and her entourage had gotten the message. But just 2 days after I locked the gate, there was a loud, aggressive knock at my front door. The kind that rattles the glass and makes your stomach clench. I opened it to find Karen standing there in all her glory. She wore a fitted black blazer over a neon pink tank top. Her bleached blonde hair twisted into a bun so tight it looked like it could cut steel. One hand rested on her hip, the other gripped a manila folder with the kind of intensity usually reserved for lawsuits. "I think we need to have a talk," she said, smiling in that fake, tight-lipped way people smile when they're seconds from losing their minds. I stepped out onto the porch, crossing my arms. "What about?" Karen tapped the folder against her thigh like a judge tapping a gavel. "About the community expectations. About what's normal in this neighborhood." She punctuated the word normal like it was an accusation. I raised an eyebrow. "Karen, the pool is on private property. It's not a community feature." She narrowed her eyes. "Under the Homeowners Association guidelines," I cut her off with a short laugh. "There is no HOA here. Karen. I checked before I bought the place. This is an open neighborhood. No fees. No association. No board." Karen flushed a deep shade of red. "Maybe not officially," she snapped. "But we've maintained standards here for years. And part of that includes allowing residents reasonable access to amenities." "Reasonable access?" I echoed, incredulous. "This isn't a public park. It's my backyard." She thrust the folder toward me. "You need to reconsider. It's selfish, childish, to shut out families who've used that pool for years. What about the kids? What about community spirit?" I didn't take the folder. I didn't even touch it. I just shook my head slowly. "Look, Karen. I understand you had an arrangement with the previous owner. But I'm not her. I bought this home for my own use. Not to host the neighborhood. The pool is off limits. That's final." For a moment, I thought she might actually stomp her foot like an angry toddler. Instead, she pulled herself upright and delivered her parting shot. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "This community takes care of its own. Outsiders who don't play nice don't last long." I watched her spin on her heel and march down my porch steps like she was storming out of a courtroom after losing a case she thought was airtight. A couple of my other neighbors, Mr. Jenkins 2 doors down and a woman watering her front garden, pretended not to watch. But their glances were as obvious as a neon sign. I closed the door, locking it behind me. I leaned my forehead against it for a moment and let out a long breath. This was not what I had signed up for when I bought this house. A bit of neighborly small talk. Sure. Waving as you passed by. Helping each other shovel driveways in the winter, that was fine. I didn't move to the suburbs for turf wars over a backyard pool. For the next couple of days, things were weirdly quiet. No knocks on the door. No mysterious visitors in the yard. The pool surface rippled peacefully in the sun. The sign on the gate standing like a lone sentinel. I started to hope maybe Karen had found some other hobby to occupy her endless supply of anger. But hope, as it turns out, is a dangerous thing. Because while Karen's mouth had gone silent, her scheming hadn't. Late one evening, as twilight draped the neighborhood in that soft, hazy glow, I spotted movement near the back fence. Not the kind of casual movement you expect, not a raccoon. Not a neighbor walking a dog, no. This was someone trying very, very hard not to be seen. I killed the porch light and moved quietly to the window. Squinting through the growing dark, there she was. Karen herself. Dressed in a black tracksuit like she was auditioning for a discount spy movie. Creeping along the edge of my backyard. She wasn't just lurking. She was inspecting. Testing the lock. Pushing against the gate. Measuring. probably trying to figure out how she could get past it without getting caught. A cold anger settled in my chest. It wasn't just about the pool anymore. It wasn't even about respect. This was about control. Karen couldn't stand that someone, anyone, had told her no and meant it. I backed away from the window and smiled grimly to myself. If Karen thought she could outstubborn me, she was in for a rude awakening. And the next time she tried to breach my property, I would be ready. It was around 11:30 p.m. when the knock came, light, urgent, and rapid. I threw on a hoodie and made my way to the door, half expecting trouble. Sure enough, when I cracked it open, standing there in pajama pants and clutching a flashlight like a lifeline, was Karen's oldest son, maybe about 11 years old. His face pale under the porch light. "Mr. I think you should know," he whispered, glancing nervously over his shoulder. "My mom's. She got Dad's big bolt cutters. She's coming." For a second, I just blinked at him, trying to process those words. Bolt cutters. Coming. Here. I crouched down to his level. "You did the right thing telling me," I said quietly. "Go straight back home. All right? If you see flashing lights later, tell your dad to come over." He nodded so fast his hair flopped, then took off running across the street, disappearing into the shadows like a scared little rabbit. My pulse was already hammering in my ears. I shut the door, locked it, and moved quickly but calmly through the house. I grabbed my keys, my phone, and my small canister of pepper spray, the one I kept for jogging at night. It wasn't much, but it would do. Then I turned off all the lights, stepped onto the back patio, and waited. The night air was cool against my skin. The only sounds the distant hum of crickets and the occasional bark of a dog somewhere down the street. I stood there, silent, still, until I heard it. Clink, clink, clink. The distinct metallic clatter of bolt cutters fumbling against the thick iron latch of my gate. I stayed in the shadows, heart pounding, watching the silhouette struggle with the heavy lock. For a moment, I almost laughed at how clumsy she was, like a raccoon trying to crack a safe. But the humor quickly died when I realized she wasn't aiming for the padlock. She was aiming to cut the actual iron latch welded into the frame. In the dimmed moonlight, I could see her grunting, leaning her full weight onto the bolt cutters. There was a horrible screech of metal giving way, a final loud snap, and then, with a groan of protest, the gate swung open. And there she stood. Karen, dressed head to toe in black yoga gear, bolt cutters dangling in one hand, a smug little smirk curling her lips. "You are out of your mind," I said, stepping into the light, my voice cold and sharp enough to cut glass. Karen startled but covered it quickly with a sneer. "You brought this on yourself. You think you can just lock us out? That pool belongs to the community. You selfish little brat." She took a step toward me, bolt cutters swinging casually at her side like some deranged scepter of entitlement. "Karen," I warned, raising my hand. "Back up. I have pepper spray and I will defend myself." She laughed, an ugly, barking sound that made my skin crawl. "You wouldn't dare. You're just a coward hiding behind a gate." And she lunged. Instinct took over. I pressed down on the trigger, aiming directly at her face. A sharp hiss filled the air, and the pepper spray hit her square in the eyes. The effect was immediate. Karen shrieked like a wounded animal, dropping the bolt cutters with a clatter. She staggered backward, clutching her face, then tripped over the uneven stones of the path and hit the ground with a thud so loud I swear it rattled my windows. I turned my head away, covering my face with my sleeve just in case of any spray blowback. Even so, the acrid tang stung my nose and made my eyes water. Karen writhed on the ground, moaning, cursing, gasping for breath. I didn't waste time. I fished out my phone with trembling fingers and called 911. "There's been an attempted break-in," I told the dispatcher. "The intruder's incapacitated." I defended myself with pepper spray. Within minutes, red and blue lights painted the neighborhood. Karen's husband, who must have woken to the commotion, came rushing over just as the paramedics arrived. His face was a mask of exhaustion and resignation when he saw Karen lying sprawled on my lawn, weeping and coughing. "I'm sorry," he said to me, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. What could I say? The officers handcuffed Karen after the EMTs confirmed she was stable. They read her rights while she wailed about tyrants and thieves and ungrateful young people ruining society. I stood quietly under the porch light, arms folded, watching it all unfold with a strange mix of anger and pity. This wasn't just a petty neighbor dispute anymore. This was war, and I wasn't planning on losing. The flashing lights were still reflecting off the windows when the officers finished cuffing Karen and helping her stumble into the back of a patrol car. She looked wild, hair matted from rolling on the ground, tears and pepper spray streaking her face, still shouting hoarse, half-coherent protests as they closed the door. I stayed on the porch, arms folded tightly across my chest, the pepper spray can still loosely clutched in one hand. A female officer approached me, calm but firm. "Sir, are you the homeowner?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. She nodded. "Can you walk us through what happened tonight?" I took a deep breath and explained how Karen had a long-standing sense of entitlement about the pool, how I had made it clear it was private property, how she had threatened me, and finally, how tonight, her son had warned me she was coming with bolt cutters. The officer's face tightened when I mentioned the bolt cutters. "You have the cutters she used, right there." I pointed to where the heavy bolt cutters lay discarded on the path, next to the mangled remains of the gate latch she had destroyed. Another officer collected them, tagging them as evidence. "And you used pepper spray when she attempted to forcibly enter the backyard and came toward you?" The female officer clarified. "Yes, ma'am. She cut the lock, broke the gate open, and advanced toward me despite warnings. I was scared she might attack me." The officer nodded approvingly. "Self-defense. You did exactly what you should have. And it's a good thing you called immediately afterward. That's important." Meanwhile, the paramedics checked Karen in the back of the ambulance, flushing her eyes and administering basic treatment. She kept trying to twist around to scream at me, but every time she did, one of the officers sternly ordered her to sit still. Across the street, the neighborhood had come alive. Porch lights flicked on one after another. Silhouettes gathered behind curtains and front windows. A few bold souls, like Mr. Jenkins from down the road, stood openly in their driveways, arms crossed, faces grim. Karen's husband had stayed quiet through it all. When the officers turned to him, asking if he wanted to accompany her to the hospital, he just shook his head slowly and muttered, "She's made her bed." It wasn't long before one of the officers handed me a case number. "You'll need this if you decide to press charges," she said. I didn't even hesitate. "I'm pressing charges," I said flatly. "Breaking and entering, property damage, trespassing. Anything else you can add?" She gave me a tight smile, almost like she was relieved to hear it. "Good. We'll make sure everything is documented properly." Karen spent the night under observation at the hospital. Unfortunately, because her injuries were minor and non-life-threatening, she was released the next day on bail. Her husband posted it without saying a word. According to the officer who followed up with me, Karen would be facing multiple misdemeanor charges, criminal trespass, vandalism, attempted forced entry. But what mattered most to me was the civil suit. By the next afternoon, I was sitting in a lawyer's office, reviewing the damage with a sharp-eyed attorney who specialized in property disputes. The destroyed wrought iron latch, the bolt cutter marks on the gate, even some of my fencing panels that had been warped from Karen's fumbling assault, it all added up. Karen wasn't just facing criminal charges anymore. She was going to pay for every dime of the damage she caused. And it wasn't going to be cheap. Estimates to repair the heavy ironwork were north of $3,000. On top of that, there were court filing fees, legal costs, And punitive damages for stress and trespassing. She'll fight it. My lawyer warned me. Tapping his pen against the paperwork. But you've got witnesses. Police reports. And security footage from your patio camera. It's an open and shut case. I nodded, feeling a satisfaction so deep it almost made me dizzy. Karen had played stupid games. Now she was winning very expensive prizes. I wondered briefly if she was still clinging to the fantasy that she was some noble warrior fighting for community rights. Or if, sitting alone in her hospital bed last night, it had finally dawned on her that she had lost, badly. Either way, it didn't matter to me anymore. I had defended my home, my rights, and my peace. And for once, the system was backing me up. The days that followed were unlike anything I'd ever seen. Word about Karen's late-night bolt-cut emission spread through the neighborhood faster than wildfire. It wasn't just the direct witnesses anymore, somehow everyone knew every sordid detail. Some of it even exaggerated, I'm sure. But the core facts were all true. Karen had tried to break into my property, got herself pepper-sprayed, and ended up being cuffed on my front lawn like a common criminal. Almost overnight, the image Karen had spent years crafting, the concerned citizen, the unofficial neighborhood leader, the guardian of standards, crumbled to dust. People stopped waving when she drove by in her faded blue SUV. Others crossed the street to avoid her when she walked the dog. Some of her so-called close friends even posted passive-aggressive comments online about respecting boundaries and not embarrassing the community. Even the neighborhood kids, the very ones she always claimed to be fighting for, gave her wary looks now. Her own son, the one who had warned me that night, barely met her eyes anymore. I couldn't blame him. That boy had more decency in his pinky finger than Karen had in her whole body. As for me, life finally settled into the peace I had hoped for when I first moved in. No more strange splashing sounds while I was trying to work. No more strangers wandering across my backyard like it was a public beach. No more passive-aggressive reminder flyers slipped under my door about community participation expectations. I tended my vegetable garden, lounged by my pool with a book, and waved politely to the neighbors who had the good sense to mind their own business. Occasionally, I'd spot Karen trudging down the sidewalk, head down, shoulders hunched like a woman carrying a boulder of humiliation on her back. I never said a word to her. I didn't have to. The silence was louder than anything else. The civil case wrapped up quicker than I expected. Karen's lawyer, a weary, beaten-down man who looked like he regretted ever taking her case, agreed to a settlement. She would pay for the full repair costs of my gate and fencing, cover my legal fees, and issue a formal written apology that would be submitted to the court records. When the apology arrived, printed on plain white printer paper, it was the most begrudging, bitter document I had ever read. No flowery language, no real remorse. Just a flat admission that she had trespassed, caused property damage, and apologized for any distress her actions may have caused. It didn't matter. I wasn't in this for an apology. I was in it to send a message. And trust me, the message landed. In a neighborhood where gossip spread faster than weather alerts, Karen's downfall became a cautionary tale. A reminder that no matter how entitled you think you are, no matter how long you've gotten away with pushing people around, you're not above the law. Private property is private. Boundaries exist for a reason. And if you don't respect them, you just might find yourself face down on the grass, handcuffed under the blinking lights of a patrol car. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit by the pool with a beer in hand, staring up at the stars and letting the cool breeze wash over me. In those moments, I realized that peace isn't just about quiet. It's about standing your ground when it matters. It's about fighting, calmly, legally, decisively, for the life you want to build. Karen learned her lesson the hard way. The rest of the neighborhood learned it the easy way, watching from a distance. And me? I finally got what I came here for. My home, my privacy, my peace. And not a single unwanted ripple in my pool.